Without further ado, I'd like to introduce Bob Hoban. He's going to be able to talk about the state of the hemp industry, and he's a really great guy. Bob, great to see you. Bob Hoban.
Thanks, brother. Appreciate it. Thank you for the kind words and the warm welcome. How's everybody doing out there today? I wanted to start with this headline. If you saw a magazine article and the title of that magazine article was "The Next Billion-Dollar Cash Crop," do you think that that's having to do with hemp? It is. But let me ask you this. When do you think that that headline, "The Next Billion-Dollar Cash Crop," when do you think that headline came out? Yes, 1938, all right? 1938, there was an article on February 14th by Popular Mechanics about the next billion-dollar cash crop. 1938. And that article concluded with the fact that, well, in order to make that happen, we need to fix some things. We need some regulatory and some legal fixes. How many years later are we, and we're still looking for those fixes? Which leads me to my next question for you. Does anyone know what red yeast rice is? What does red yeast rice have to do with industrial hemp? Here's what I want you to think about, and this is going to sort of dovetail with what I think the future of industrial hemp is. Red yeast rice is a natural product, right? It's a natural product that you can purchase on Whole Foods, any natural product store, online, and it helps with cholesterol. It contains a product that's the natural equivalent of a pharmaceutical product called statin. Statin does the exact same thing as the natural product. It regulates your cholesterol. It helps with cholesterol, okay? It's a cholesterol drug. So you have red yeast rice, a natural product, where you can buy something on the natural side, then you can buy it on the pharmaceutical side. It's the same product. It's allowed to be sold as a pharma drug and a nutritional supplement at the same time. Get your mind around that for a second, because that's what we ought to be talking about when we talk about industrial hemp. Everybody looks at the medicinal aspects of the cannabinoids that are present in a cannabis plant. We all, I think in this room, would all agree that there's tremendous health benefits to cannabinoids. But the problem is, if you look at it through a medical lens, that carries with it legal significance, and that legal significance is regulated by the FDA. If it's going to be medicine, it's got to be medicine. Is that red yeast rice I buy in the shelves of a Whole Foods, is that medicine? It's a supplement. It might have a benefit that's medicinal to the human body, but it's not medicine. Get your mind around that distinction, because that's where we need to be pushing for the future of industrial hemp. You need a world where products made from industrial hemp can be sold on the natural product side, so that all these fine companies out here that make cannabinoid extracts and products can continue to exist. But we also need a world where the pharmaceutical companies can have their day, because they're not going to have it any other way. So you need to exist side by side, pharma products that are cannabis or hemp-based medicine products, largely synthetic products, and then natural products on the other side. Pick your choice, pick one side or the other. But you need to be thinking about it this way, because if you think about where we are today, this sets the table for the federal government's treatment of the industrial hemp plant. In that 1938 article, they talked about all the wonderful things that you can do with industrial hemp, technology-wise, and all the industries it could impact. Fibers, fuels, paper. And at that point in time, there were some powerful interests. In the United States, there was the DuPont family, there was the Hearst family. And they basically looked at those products and they said, wait a second, if we get that from hemp, that competes with us and what we're doing over here. So that's why back in the 30s, marijuana and hemp were basically combined together, because it was an affront to existing industry. But technology's changed, and what else do we know 70 some odd, 80 years later? We know that there's these other cannabinoids in a cannabis plant, in industrial hemp, and those cannabinoids have value. Value to the human body, to our endocannabinoid system, right? To animals in the same way. So today's problem is very similar but different than the problem that existed in the 30s. In the 30s, this plant was going to compete with existing industry as we knew it at that point in time. Fuel and paper, for example, to name two. Here, industrial hemp competes with what? Pharma. With the pharmaceutical industry understands that cannabinoids can do certain things to the human body and can be manipulated in a pharmaceutical drug or a pharmaceutical substance to prevent and treat certain conditions in the human body. So it's those cannabinoids that exist today that creates the confusion, the misunderstanding, and the problem with federal law. So how can we take that confusion? How can we take the fact that there's these cannabinoids in the plant? Because I can tell you, as we sit here today, if these other cannabinoids didn't exist in the plant, if it was just THC, and we can eliminate the THC or get it down to below that 0.3% level, we would not have as much opposition to use of this plant as we see today on the industrial hemp side. But it's because there's these other cannabinoids in there, the law treats industrial hemp in a certain way by saying below 0.3% THC. That solves the THC problem. Solve the THC problem, but now you've got a cannabinoid problem. What about the other cannabinoids? Who wants the cannabinoids? Pharmaceutical companies. They want to control that. So that leads me back to where I started. How do we exist in a world where the pharmaceutical companies can have their cannabinoids, synthetic or naturally occurring, but at a certain potency level and a certain formula that exists in a FDA-regulated drug, and at the same time have wellness products, food products, oils, extracts, proteins that all contain cannabinoids but exist in a natural state? That's what you got to get your mind around. That is what is causing the confusion at the federal level. Because the agencies, the FDA and the DEA, in a certain respect, they view their job, or at least they're persuaded that their job has to do with helping pharmaceutical companies or FDA-regulated businesses, in effect, sell products, sell medicine. How do you bridge that gap? That leads me to where I think we need to go. And I don't know where Ben went, but we've got these great hats. Make America Hemp Again. Make America Hemp Again is the name of the policy that we've actually talked with the existing administration about. And what it does is it takes the plant and it regulates it into 3 verticals. And when I say the plant, I'm talking about the cannabis plant, period. Forget about 0.3% or below. That shapes out based on the ultimate uses of that plant. So for example, if I have a cannabis plant, I can use it for industrial purposes, fuels, fibers, building materials. You guys know the rest. That's one vertical, the industrial aspect of the plant. How do I do that? I pass something like the Industrial Hemp Farming Act, which is being proposed and will ultimately be presented in Congress here in probably the coming weeks, if not the next 2 months. That solves the industrial problem coming from one plant. The next vertical of the 3 is the nutraceutical vertical. Nutraceutical, when I say nutraceutical, I'm thinking about the dispensary system on the marijuana side, which is state regulated. I'm thinking about food products that come from hemp, like these fine companies out here. I'm thinking about wellness products that contain cannabinoids. That's the nutraceuticals industry, or the nutraceuticals vertical in my mind, in my model. When you think about that, how do you fix that? How do you facilitate that from one plant? What you do is you create a statute, a law that mirrors the existing policy memos from the Obama administration, but you make it into a law. You codify that. You take a policy and you make it into a statute, which says states can do what they want in their boundaries. And if it's a product to be sold in interstate commerce, meaning one below 0.3% THC, you got to follow FDA guidelines. You got to make sure there's consumer safeguards in place. That's the nutraceutical, the natural products vertical. You follow me? The third one is the pharmaceutical model, all right? It's one plant. We're not calling it industrial hemp or marijuana. We're calling it a cannabis plant. And we're creating laws and regulations that create 3 distinct industries from one plant. The third would be the pharmaceutical model. That requires what? Rescheduling. But rescheduling, that happens outside of an intrastate, meaning a marijuana system that might be regulated and happening in a state, outside of the food and the wellness products that come from industrial hemp. It happens in a different space altogether. And that requires rescheduling and allows pharmaceutical companies to do what they do so people can have a choice. Not everybody wants to ingest an oil. Some people are more comfortable, believe it or not, taking a synthetic product that's a cannabinoid-based product and taking it in a pill form or the like. Let people have their choice. Let the pharmaceutical companies have that, but not to the exclusion of the natural products, the nutraceuticals vertical. So that's where we need to get our mind around, and that's really how you make America hemp again. With that said, how do you make that hemp happen? How do you make that hempin', right? Make America hemp again. I love it. So I think it's education at this stage. It really comes down to education, and we're dealing with a Congress and a presidential administration who just frankly have not had to pay attention to this issue. Call it ignorance, call it a reckless disregard of facts, call it whatever you want to call it, but at the end of the day, the Republicans have not had to pay attention and become educated on this issue, whether we're talking about hemp or marijuana or the cannabis plant as a whole. They haven't had to pay attention to it because they weren't in charge. And the Obama administration was going to do what it was going to do policy-wise anyway. So some people say, oh my God, this is a tremendous horror. How am I going to deal with this? You're going to educate them. Look at states. We saw it in just about every single state that has a marijuana system. When the Republican legislators are educated, when they see that this helps people, that hemp is different than marijuana as a fundamental concept, they tend to change their mind. So don't look at it as just this obstacle that can't be overcome. Look at it as an opportunity to educate, because now these folks are in control. And guess what? The almighty dollar will take the day, and if you create 3 industries versus 1 pharma industry that everything gets merged into, there's more jobs, there's more revenue, there's more money. And if that's ultimately what this political party is interested in, then speak that language and go down the road of education. So all is not lost, it's an opportunity. There's a tremendous opportunity to educate, and that education should in fact lead to making America hemp again. So that's what I want you to get your mind around. We can get mad, but we can't get mad to the point where we don't try anymore. Education needs to take the day, and there's a lot of misinformation out there. Misinformation that's both relied on and fostered by some of the agencies, the DEA in particular. But at the end of the day, a court's probably going to have to decide some of those issues. And we've got that. We're on top of that. But the education piece is something that you all can walk out of this room and do. That's why you're in here. That's why I'm here. That's why we're all here. Let me just tell you one last story before I turn the mic back over to Ben. I was advising a particular Department of Agriculture in the southeast part of the country. Smart people, PhDs on staff, the head of their Department of Ag, and we had a 4-hour meeting blocked. First almost 2 hours of that meeting, unexpected to me, were based on what's the difference between marijuana and hemp. I'd gone in to advise them about their hemp program. What's the difference between marijuana and hemp? I mean, really, is that where we're starting? Yes, yes. That's where we're starting, and that's what you got to understand. So just because you know something and you think everybody else ought to know it, it's not the way it is. We need to educate, we need to have patience, and we need to deliver the message in an unbiased and factual manner and not alternative facts. That is how you make America hemp again.
Thank you. Thank you, Bob. What great insights. And we actually have a few minutes for questions. So could I ask a question really quick? I just wanted a quick update on this lawsuit that you're leading the charge on. If you could just give a quick update, and then we'll be able to take some questions. If anybody has a question, there's a microphone right there. You might be able to walk up to it, and we just have a few minutes for questions.
Sure, thank you. So there's actually two important lawsuits that are pending in Federal Court of Appeals in Northern California as we speak today. The first one, and it's thanks to our wonderful petitioner / plaintiff, the HIA, who's behind that wall out there, so please go by and say hello to them and support their efforts here. It's challenging this marijuana extract ruling that came down on December 14th. Marijuana extract was a code function, a definition that came out by the DEA. This was a process that was initiated five years ago. The rule came into effect on December 14th. What happened is they took a definition that existed before the Farm Bill and before the technology that exists today was in place, and they said marijuana extract is a controlled substance. And a marijuana extract is anything that comes from a cannabis plant, number one, and number two, that contains cannabinoids. First of all, cannabis is not a prohibited substance. Marijuana is. That's a legal distinction that you need to read to really understand. But marijuana does not constitute the entire cannabis plant. There are exempted parts of the plant, number one. Number two, cannabinoids. All of the 88 plus, I think we're discovering more and more weekly, those are not per se controlled substances. They're just not at the federal level. And that's something that the federal government needs to understand. And unfortunately, reason hasn't prevailed, so we had to take them to court to push that, to have a court decide that issue. Our opening brief is due on Monday. The other important case is a case where, again, with the HIA as a petitioner, going back to their case that they won in 2004 with our fine attorney, Patrick Goggin, out of San Francisco, which basically said naturally occurring THC is not an illegal substance if it comes from the exempted parts of the plant. That happened in 2004. DEA never appealed that ruling, yet they refused to acknowledge that ruling on their website. They refused to change their rule, their regulation, so they're in violation of the court order. So a petition was filed, a motion basically, call it contempt. You're in contempt of court because you're not following the court order. That's also pending. So between those two actions, both in Northern California federal courts, something is going to break here and break very soon, and we feel very comfortable that we have the law on our side. So please say thank you to folks like the HIA. It's our pleasure to do it. This is what we do. So don't thank us. We're here to serve. This is fun for us. This is what lawyers do. But we need your support, and your support really comes down to just helping educate, spreading the word. Don't spread the misinformation. Spread the right word.
Awesome. Thank you so much. We have time for just about one question, but you might be able to find Bob. His booth is right over there, so you can talk to him or any of his other colleagues. But I think we unfortunately we only have about 2 or 3 minutes, but you can.
So you confused me. I thought S-134 and H.R. 525 was already introduced in the Senate and the House.
I can help clarify that. Thank you so much for asking that. I actually work in Washington, D.C. on these issues. S-134, H.R. 525 were the Industrial Hemp Farming Act. They've not yet been reintroduced this year. We are working on developing new language that we think is going to be even more powerful, and we will be reintroducing that soon. But make sure to go to the Vote Hemp table right on the other side of this, right outside. So don't leave yet. You'll be able to go after these talks, but you can make sure to sign up. You'll get email alerts, and you'll get talking scripts on how to take action effectively. And we might have time for just one more question.
Yes, thank you very much for giving your information about the 1938 $1 billion crop. And historically, Colorado was a state where it first became illegal in October 1937, was where the first person out in Denver, Colorado was arrested and thrown in Leavenworth prison for 4 years. His name was Samuel Caldwell, and the person that he was with was named Moses Baca, and they were the first persons to be arrested in the country, and then your billion-dollar crop thing came out a year later. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. It wasn't a question, but is what he meant to say was that if you Google billion-dollar crop in Google, you can see the actual article that was written in 1938, and it's pretty cool. Also another plug, it's Hemp History, and Hemp History Week table is also right on the other side, so you can learn all about hemp history, including the 1938 article. Do anything else, or?
No, thank you all for coming and for coming out and supporting the NoCo Hemp Expo.
Thank you, Bob. Thank you. Let's hear it for Bob.